These bikes were terrible. This is my new 2005 KX250F project. Why the heck were they so bad, and why did I decide to buy one? Stay tuned. Now, I have to rewind it a little bit because maybe the 2005 wasn't the worst production model ever, but the 2004 KX250F, RMZ250 models might have been the worst production models ever produced. So why isn't the 2005 as bad as the 2004 models? Well, in 2005, they did make a lot of upgrades to the 2004 model that fixed the problems that everybody was seeing with the 2004. So we're about to dive into those right now and then dive into this new project that I've got going on. When Kawasaki and Suzuki came together to form this bike, Suzuki pretty much had responsibility of producing the engine, and Kawasaki was everything else, the chassis, suspension, etc. And what Suzuki greatly underestimated was how much heat these engines would produce, and they simply didn't make the radiators large enough. So if you're a faster rider or just riding in hot conditions, if you're sitting on the starting line of a race for more than 30 seconds, the coolant would literally start boiling over and you would lose coolant. And what happens when you lose coolant to a bike that already has cooling issues? You're gonna blow an engine. So for the 2005 model, Kawasaki went back to the drawing board. They made each of the radiators 40 millimeters larger, which increased the cooling capacity to keep this engine cooler. The other major issue with the 2004 cooling system was that they made the water pump and oil filter cover one piece. You had to literally drain the coolant before you go ahead and change the oil and change the oil filter. So maybe that's why these things had such an issue with people blowing them up, because people simply didn't want to drain the coolant to change their oil filter, which led to them not changing their oil, which led to contaminated engine parts, and boom. But companies like Pro Circuit, Boyson, if you had a 2004 model, they made aftermarket covers and water pumps that increased flow and also separated the oil filter cover from the water pump cover, so then you didn't have to drain the coolant in order to change the oil. Then you'll notice on the 2005 model that Kawasaki and Suzuki also did their homework and made this change for the 2005 model. You can see here, the oil filter cover is separated from the water pump cover. Good job, Kawasaki. The next major issue with these bikes was the top end, specifically the valve train. In a short time under hard riding, valve springs would start to lose their tension. The stock TI valves were pretty soft and they'd start to cup out. Valve clearances would dwindle down to nothing. And if you were riding these early production motors under those circumstances, they were just bound to have catastrophic failure. So how do you go about fixing those issues? Well, what a lot of people did in these bikes was switch to stainless steel valves and heavier valve springs. Since the stainless steel valves are a little bit heavier than the TI valves, you might have noticed a little bit of performance loss, but if you were a weekend warrior like I was, you really didn't need to have those TI valves in there. You probably wouldn't even notice the difference in power. But again, if you were racing at the highest level, why not go with TI valves if budget is not an issue? So you could have the biggest performance edge that you could. You could change out the OEM cams for hot cams or Pro Circuit. Again, these are big dollar items that people buying these four strokes probably didn't want to do. So it probably led to one of the reasons why these things got such a bad rap. But here's the thing, and it's not news to anybody, all of those early model four strokes were just brutal when it came to their valve train. The CRF specifically had probably one of the weakest valve trains out there. And growing up, we had all these bikes in the basement, aside from the RMZ, which is basically the KX250F. These are the bikes right here. I had an 05 YZ250F. My brother had the 04 KX250F. And my other hermano Ali, he had the 05 CRF 250. It felt like every other ride we were tearing those things down to shim the valves. Just in general, that was my experience with those, and I'm sure a lot of other people had that same experience as well. Moving on to the next issue with the 04, the transmission. So third and fourth gear were known to go out on these things. I was also reading up that people were having issues shifting from second, third, and fourth gear due to bent shift forks. In 05, they did shot peen third gear to make it stronger, increase durability. I was listening to one of the latest Gypsy Tales podcasts with Ivan Tedesco, who raced the 04 bike, and he pretty much said every time he got on that bike to ride it, test it, it pretty much blew up. Can you imagine that though? Not having any confidence in the bike. But Pro Circuit was pushing the limits, trying to figure out what parts worked, what didn't, the reliability of these engines, of their parts. But he did say once they figured out the 2004 model, he never had a DNF outdoors in 2005, and he is the 2005 outdoor champion in the 250 I almost said 250 class, the 125 class still at that time. So kudos to Kawasaki and Pro Circuit for figuring the bike out. And then one of the final issues that these 04 engines experienced was a weak clutch. The plates and fibers that Suzuki used in the engine here weren't strong enough for the load that was put on them from the engine. So riders would experience pretty serious clutch slippage, and what happens when a clutch slips? It's building heat in the engine. Pile that on to the weak valve train, the cooling issues that this bike had, it's just a recipe for disaster. In 05, Kawasaki did fix the problem, put some more durable clutch plates in there, but if you had an 04 model or even an 05 model, I don't know why you just wouldn't go out and buy a set of Hinton clutch plates, pretty much the best clutch plates out there, and you pretty much solve that problem for pretty cheap. So, I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, did the professionals see a lot of issues racing the 04 KX250F and RMZ250? Yeah, they did. But they're also pushing the limits, trying to get as much power out of these engines as possible, making them go as fast as possible. I spent a lot of time doing some research on Vital MX forums, Thumper Talk. You kind of get a lot of mixed bag reviews. You get some guys that are like, I've never had an issue with these bikes, 400 hours without doing a valve change. That's just completely insane to me. Could it be based on how you maintain the bike? Yes, but you could also have those lemons too, where you maintain the bike to a T and you just have issues. There was also those people too. There are people that swear by them, do not buy them whatsoever. And there's people like, hey, I've actually never had an issue and it was one of the coolest bikes I've owned. So to me, it's pretty much a coin flip whether you got a good RMZ250 or a good KX250F. Does that drive a lot of consumer confidence? Probably not. Would you probably want to go buy another model? Probably. But if you're a diehard Kawi guy like me, buying a 20-year-old bike, I don't really care. So what are we going to do with it? Well, it's going to be a PC bike, obviously. I got a pipe right here, triple clamps. I got a whole load of PC parts ready to go for it. What model am I going to do? You guys are going to find out in the next video. But from watching the video up to this point, you got a pretty firm idea that this bike is really clean as is. A quick story behind the bike, here it is. I actually didn't go and pick up the bike in person. It was about 6 hours from me or so. Good buddy of mine, Jimmy Kaiser, you guys would know him as J Kaiser Custom MX on Instagram and YouTube. The bike was pretty much right near where he lived. I was like, hey Jimmy, want to do me a favor and go buy this bike for me? So I've had the bike for over 1.5 years now and have slowly been collecting parts for it. I want to say I bought it for $2,250. It was listed for $2,500 maybe. So the condition of the bike and the price, it was just way too good of a deal to pass up. But as you can see, the bike is pretty much in all OEM condition. I would say 95% of the KX250Fs and RMZ250s that you see on Facebook Marketplace these years, the 04, 05, 06, are just trash. And in 05, I was 16 years old, going through the transition from 125 and 252 strokes to the 250F and 450s. So it's just such a unique era and probably one of the best eras of the sport, in my opinion. It sticks with me. And like I said, we had these bikes all in our basement growing up. So grabbing a bike like this has some serious nostalgia factor for me. All right, let's land the plane on this episode about the 04, 05 KX250F. If you guys had an 04, 05 KX250F or an 04, 05, 06 RMZ250. And if you had any horror stories, leave those in the comments below. If you heard of anybody having horror stories or even having good experiences with these bikes, leave them in the comments below. In the next episode, we're gonna be framing this bike, tearing it completely down, getting everything all cleaned up. I've already done a little engine work to it already, thanks to Wiseco Pro X and Cometic gaskets. You'll find out what that is coming up. And along with tearing this thing down, I'm gonna be going through all the cool parts that are going on this build from all the Pro Circuit parts that I found that are era specific, from Racetech titanium, UFO plastics, MV hubs out of the UK, XL Takasago rims, RK chains, Dunlop tires, the list goes on. And I'm gonna finally let you guys on to what Pro Circuit theme that this bike is gonna be. And as always, I appreciate your guys' support in watching these videos. Hit the subscribe button if you wanna see this project come to fruition and some other projects down the road. You can catch up on my 1999 KX250 Splitfire project. But overall, it's been a while and I'm excited to have a new project on deck. So, as always, ride hard, be safe, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace!